about what percent that is, the increase, and I know what the financial situation is in most other communities. I think we're actually in a, I hate to say this, but we're in a good position.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we can get that much funding without an override, we're in a pretty good position this year.
Yeah.
I really do
But
agree.
if it's gonna, I don't wanna use the word cripple, but if it's gonna debilitate the town side.
Right.
And they feel if we need to go forward with an override, we need to support it.
Right, oh, yes.
I think there are a couple of issues that need to be stated more clearly. The override amount that was originally envisioned was $1,211,000, which I don't have a hard number, but it would have been on the order of a 4% increase in the tax rate. The average homeowner would have been, something short of $200. Now, $380,000 has been reduced from the expenses and presumably reduced from the need for an override, so that we'd be talking about something less than $150 per homeowner. And it could be easier to take a small bite and another small bite next year than to put it all together in one basket. And if the selectmen are putting it on as an override question, I think what becomes incumbent for all of us is to make sure that all of the information that we can possibly get out to the public is there so that the public can choose. Obviously, if an override is not forthcoming and we have to do without some positions, we have to do that. But these are our positions that are in our budget because they're important to the education of our children. And I don't think we should just assume that it would be better to put off an override. I think it would be, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at the questions both from what not having an override does to the stability of the town's budget as well as the schools. And I don't want to seem in any way critical. I think, as other people have said, what the selectmen have accomplished here for the children of North Reading is fabulous. We felt when we put the budget together that the minimum required a little bit more, and for good reason. And I think we should be keeping people mindful of that if there is an override out there. And if the selectmen have voted to keep an override there, it should be our job to make sure that everybody has as much data as possible.
Counselor will be back in a minute. So is there anything else on the budget? So we get a direction for the financial planning meeting, and as soon as we have more information, we'll communicate it to the public in an email. Okay. We can move on to the next item then. We have the school start time study report, and Nicole, you're on.
Oh, boy, okay. The School Start Times Committee was convened in the fall of 2005, which is sad to think about how long ago that was, to discuss the issue of school starting times. I pretty much spearheaded the effort. I had done a great deal of research beforehand into trying to improve mostly student health, both physical and mental, but also to see what other benefits might be accrued by changing the bell schedule, changing what time the high school started and what time the middle school started. So we convened a committee to discuss the issues, to do more research. We even had one member of the committee who was specifically detailed to look for any data that would show that changing the start time to a later start would have to see if there were any studies that showed a negative impact on teenagers and found nothing at all. So the school start times committee considered the following questions. Would North Reading teenagers benefit from later school start times? If so, how much later? Should the high school and middle schools open? Would there be any negative physical or psychological effects of a later start time on adolescents? What would the effects of different starting times be on busing, sports, after-school jobs, after-school childcare? What do the administrators, school councils, and parent organizations have to say? And what are the next steps we as a district should take? So, the committee did a great deal of research. There are several major studies on teenage sleep needs. There's one from the University of Minnesota that concluded the optimum amount of sleep for teenagers is 9.25 hours per night. Now, our high school begins at 7:30 in the morning. Assuming the average student rises at 6:30, I'm sure there are some who get up earlier so they can catch the bus. There are some who may live close to the high school who can get up later. But assuming that they got up about 6:30, that student would have to go to bed at 9:15 to achieve this optimum sleep time. Now, I don't know about you, I'm a parent of 2 small children, so I'm, in folky mode when it comes to bedtime, and even I don't go to bed that early.
We're still in practice.
Right.
Particularly in school committee.
Right.
Yes, but according to the National Sleep Foundation, teenagers are biologically hardwired by melatonin secretion. Melatonin is I believe it's a hormone. In any case, it's a brain chemical that causes sleepiness. Their secretions really start kicking out near 11 p.m. And as the melatonin levels approach the daytime cycle, they become more wakeful near 8 a.m. And teenagers who try to go to bed earlier than 11 usually have trouble falling asleep. So it's likely that the majority of North Reading High students who get up at 6:30 a.m. get about 7.5 hours of sleep per night, about 80% of the optimum amount. Now, if they're only getting 80%, then they are chronically sleep deprived by definition. According to the Sleep Foundation, teens who are sleep deprived have more difficulty learning, they're more depressed, they're more impulsive, they have a higher incidence of tobacco and alcohol use, lower athletic performance, and are more prone to violence than teens who get enough sleep. They are also more prone to drowsiness-related traffic accidents. Now, I looked into particular examples. I spoke to superintendents of school districts that had changed their start time. One that stood out to me was Fayette County, Kentucky, which is a large district in the suburban area of Lexington. Saw its local traffic accident rate drop by 15% when they changed their start times. And their accident rate dropped during a period in which the statewide accident rate went up by 8%. Now, they changed their start times by flipping them with the elementary start time so they could save money on busing. So the long and the short of it is that the committee concluded that any amount of increased sleep, even as little as 15 minutes, could be of benefit to the students. And so since the North Reading Public Schools essentially control the student wake time through our school start times, we looked at various starting options, and we came up with 4 that were the most viable. I'm sure there are other permutations, but these are the ones we could, that we came up with that seemed the most viable. Option 1 would be to keep the start times the same. Of course, the pro of that is we don't need additional buses, the older siblings are home before the younger ones, so they can babysit, no change of schedules for after-school activities, jobs, sports. The negatives of keeping the times the same would be that the current schedule doesn't meet the sleep needs of teenagers. Teenagers are out of school unsupervised for longer periods before the parents come home, and many of the younger kids end up needing both before and after school care. Option 2 would be to keep elementary school start times the same and just move the middle and high schools to a later start. Now, the problem with this is busing. We currently have a 4-tier bus system, which means the same group of 11 buses does 4 separate runs during the course of the morning in order to get all the students to school. And if we moved the middle and high school, that would begin clashing with the runs for the elementary schools. So we would either need to combine busing so that the middle and high school students arrived at school at close to the same time. Or, you know, we could bus them separately, which would involve hiring many more buses, which, you know, given the budget discussion we've just had, doesn't really seem to be an option. So there are advantages to both of those, and that would be no change to the elementary schedules. And both the middle and high school students would gain potential sleep or breakfast time, which is also a health benefit, that they'd have a little extra time to get something in their bodies before they get out the door, other than coffee. There'd be less time in the afternoons for teenagers to be unsupervised, but then there's, you know, the cost of additional buses, potential theoretical problems with having middle and high schoolers on the same buses, although of the districts I spoke to had done that, you know, there might have been some initial bobbles, but overall worked out fine, no major difficulties. And of course, possible interference with sports schedules, after-school jobs, activities. Option 3 would be to begin school for all the grades 15 minutes to half an hour later. It would allow teenagers to get at least a little more sleep or time for breakfast, little less time for teenagers to be unsupervised after school, slightly decreased need for after-school care for elementary school students, wouldn't require any additional buses, but there might be a somewhat greater, or at least a maintained need for elementary school care before school, and interference with sports after-school schedules. Option 4 would be to exchange the current start times. Now, the elementary schools currently start at 8:30 and 8:55. There's, you know, the so-called early and late schools. And the middle and high schools begin at 7:30 and 7:55 respectively. So, by flipping these and having the elementary schools go in the earlier 2 slots and the middle and high schools go in the later 2 slots, that gives the biggest advantage to teenagers getting the sleep that they need. No additional busing costs, only a moderate additional cost if we combine the busing for the middle and high schoolers, so we wouldn't have to throw the schedule quite so far off for the younger kids. There are some benefits possible for the younger children, with them spending most of their school time in the morning, when a good deal of them are more alert and focused. There would be a reduced need, if not eliminated need, for before-school care for elementary school students, and less time after school, you know, with unsupervised teens running amok. But the disadvantages are also very clear. Some teenagers would have to get to school unsupervised. There'd be a greater need for after-school care for elementary school students, especially with the high school and middle schoolers not being available. And there'd definitely be a need to alter after-school sports, extracurricular activity, and job schedules. So, the committees held meetings with all the school councils, including the principals of each school. The principals did agree that a later start for teenagers would be to their benefit, and an earlier start time and earlier dismissal time for younger students would at the least not be detrimental. There was one elementary principal who felt that the younger children begin losing focus as the afternoon goes on, and it seems to be more difficult for them to learn as it approaches the current dismissal time. Some elementary school parents felt that an earlier start would be a good idea. There were others who had children that are difficult to rouse at the times they're getting up now, and expressed concern about getting their kids up even earlier than that. um,